All right, so we have two images here. One is a character portrait and the other is a beauty portrait. And this is your beauty portrait, and you have your subject looking down at something, very focused on something. Now, what we want from a beauty portrait is really something that's about style, about beauty, about glam. And that's not what we're getting so much here. This actually, to me, seems like a character portrait. As we have your subject looking down at something and working on something. You said he's an acupuncturist, and maybe he's working on something in his space that would tell us more about him. So him looking down and having something that he's focused on, possibly working on, I think is much more of a character portrait than a beauty portrait. Now this image is significantly underexposed. If this was properly exposed, it would probably be like a stop and a half more exposed. Yeah, a stop and a third more exposed. But I think that darkness is intentional. It really adds a mood to this image of him kind of fiddling around with tinkering around with what he's doing. And the reason I think that's intentional is because of the light that we're seeing coming from behind and creating this nice illumination along his nose. If you were able to move him in a way that allowed us to have that brightness that we have there all the way down his face, you can see we still have it, but it's not nearly as refined. I think that could work well. Also, we want to see separation between his hair and what's behind him. So having that light create a bit of a hair light, I think would work really well here. So I think this as an image is a strong image, but not as a beauty portrait. I see this more as a character portrait. And then here you have him as a character portrait, but this is a really straightforward image. You have him in his jacket being more of a doctor, opposed to the other image where it feels like he's creating something. And so he's a doctor, and the image overall has a dark exposure. We would want to expose this with more because we want this to appear white. We want the background to appear white. This part of the histogram should be utilized. We're also seeing that you're shooting with a really slow shutter speed, and as we get closer, we can see that there's movement in his face. It's not totally sharp. So this image you would need to set up with more light to be able to fully illuminate him, have a faster shutter speed, and be able to capture these whites purely as white. This is a character portrait. It's showing him as a doctor, but I find the other image more interesting because here it just seems like he's posted up against the wall. We're not able to see what he's working on. Where here we're starting to get into his space and what his craft is. So this gives me more information about him. So hopefully you're able to see that distinction. When we're looking at a beauty portrait, it's really all about just showing the beauty, the structure of the person, and using the lighting to enhance that. So if you want to shoot a second image for a beauty portrait, you're welcome to do that to raise your overall grade.